Hey everyone, you're tuned into InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. Join us as we talk about anything.
And everything.
All the stuff that makes life interesting.
So let's get to it. Hey everybody, and welcome to the InfoQuench podcast with Jeff.
And Amy.
And today's podcast, we're going to be talking about wine.
I know.
Everybody likes to drink it as long as you're of age.
I'm so excited about wine.
You have been really enjoying your wine.
I have, and I'm really
say.
excited about this episode. And I was doing research, and I just got down a rabbit hole of wine information, and I think this is definitely going to be at least a two-parter.
It's great
if
because
not
I
more.
know that one of on your bucket list is to go to a vineyard at some point.
It is
We're
pre-COVID, and
Yeah.
hitting us. It was definitely on my bucket list for this summer to hit a local vineyard and
Yeah.
and do the whole wine tasting ritual. And I just love wine, but you know what? I really don't know much about it at all. I really
No,
don't.
I don't either. I know that there are a lot of local establishments like Happiness Wine Bar that have, informational sessions on different kinds of wine and how to properly drink it and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing a course and learning more, because when I started to read about it, I found it really fascinating. And I mean, one thing I do know about wine is that I love it.
You do love it. You have wine right now. What kind of wine are you drinking this evening? Or do you...
Red wine.
Red wine of the color red. Okay. Sounds good.
Probably should have looked at the bottle as I was pouring it.
It's not our Ruderberg, is it?
No,
Okay.
it's not our Ruderberg.
I bought 2 bottles of that.
Yes. Jeff and I have a special wine, Ruderberg wine, that we drank when we first
Yeah.
started dating, and it became like our anniversary wine, because
Right.
when we were married, we did up a little box and we put a bottle of the Ruderberg wine in it, and we each wrote a letter to the other, and
Hoping what would be, where we would be in 5 years.
right. And so on our 5-year wedding anniversary, we opened the letters and drank the wine and saw how close we were to our predictions, and we were pretty close, I think.
We were relatively close, yeah.
We were vague in our letters so that we covered
Yeah.
our butts, but
Yeah.
anyways, it was kind of a neat little ritual to do. One thing I know about wine is that in my 20s, I was all about the white. And then as I got
Yeah.
older, I moved into reds. And I think it seems to be common. I think it's common that people will switch from one to the other. And usually, I think most people like one or the other more. Like
I typically do not like, and I never have really liked white wine, really.
Why is that?
I don't know. I just like, I like the full-bodied taste of the red wine.
That's the same reason I like a red too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting in reading about this, and when we kind of go through some of this information, the more I learned about white and the different varieties and all that. So let's jump straight into it.
All right, let's do it.
And it got me thinking about this. I had it on my radar to do a podcast on wine for a while, but I was watching an episode of Amy Schumer's Amy Schumer Learns to Cook.
Oh, yes.
That she and her husband, her chef husband, did during the quarantine.
Admittedly, quite an entertaining show.
It was.
It was really well done. And she is naturally funny, I find. She really is. She may get a bad rap because I know we watched that video on YouTube where she was stealing all the jokes.
She had stole some jokes and things like that. And
almost word for word. But anyways, she is funny. She is funny on the show.
And so she had a little segment in the show where I guess she used to, years ago, before she was, a famous comedian, actress, she bartended. And so she would do a segment on the show where she'd make cocktails. But one of the things she did was she showed a trick around opening a bottle of wine. And it's that, the little foil sleeve that is on top of of a bottle of wine that's corked. And usually you have to get a cutter.
Yeah.
And she showed that you can really just kind of yank it right off the top. Just give it a little wiggle. Now, I've tried it with some wines, and some wines are glued to it, but other wines it's worked for. So it's worth a try. If you don't have a cutter, you can just slide it off.
Don't try it with olive oil either. You need to get out like a crowbar and
we recently had a very stubborn bottle of olive oil that we couldn't quite. Anyways, I digress. And I had mentioned back in episode 53, we did one called The Origin of Common Cocktail Names, and I talked about having to do an episode on wine. So it only took me close to 20 episodes to get to it, but here we are.
But we have, just as a little side note, we surpassed our 2,600 downloads. Is that right? Was it 2,600?
2,700.
2,700.
Which I know is low in the world of podcasts,
but we don't
for us,
care. I mean, we just do
It's
it.
pretty cool.
We just do it for ourselves and for the handful of people that listen. You know.
Yeah,
Or maybe
even-
there's more than a handful. Okay, let's just be honest. There's at least 2 handfuls of people that listen.
But it's just, even if you have the few people that listen and that you get to actually, talk
Yeah.
to, and you run into them and they say, oh, they listened to a
We're
recent
proud of
episode
that,
and they
though.
enjoyed it.
We really are.
Yeah, that's great.
And thanks for listening, everybody.
We
Okay,
love doing
back to the wine. Let's
we love
drink some
doing it.
wine.
Just download numbers aside, we do check them every once in a while, but we love just recording and
Yeah,
just going through it and spending the time chatting.
that's right.
So, according to winefolly.com, what is wine? What defines wine? So, it's an alcoholic beverage that's made with the fermented
Grapes.
juice of grapes.
Yeah.
But technically, any fruit is capable of being used for wine. So, like apples or cranberries,
Oranges.
plums. But if it says just wine on the label, then it's made with grapes.
Okay.
But they're not the same type of grapes you'd find in the grocery store. Now, I
No.
didn't know this, but those are like called table grapes, but wine grapes are a little bit different.
They're tart, aren't they?
They're smaller, sweeter, and have
Oh, sweeter.
thick skins,
Okay.
and they contain seeds. Now, I know table grapes can contain seeds as well, but smaller and sweeter. So I thought that was interesting. I
That
didn't
is really
realize that.
interesting.
So don't be going to your grocery store and hitting the produce aisle and thinking you can just stomp on those suckers and make some wine. It's not going to happen.
See, I did not know this. So
Well, it may
It's
happen.
really interesting.
There are over 1,300 wine grape varieties that are used in commercial production, but only about 100 of these make up 70% of the world's vineyards. So
Oh, wow.
there's a small section of those varieties
I
that
would
are
imagine
actually
that
used
certain
more commonly
varieties
for wine.
of grapes only grow in certain climates and places in the world, you know?
Yeah, definitely. That has the climates definitely have an effect on it. So today, the most planted wine grape in the world is the Cabernet Sauvignon.
Cabernet Sauvignon.
And
So that's the name of the grape?
it is.
Cabernet Sauvignon,
Right.
which is French for what? Cabaret.
Well, no,
What-
it's
no.
not French for anything. It's
I
just,
thought it was.
It's just the. No, I don't think
Oh,
so.
right, okay.
It's just the name of the grape.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Gotcha.
It
I
may
honestly
be. I
thought
think
there
it's just
might
like.
have been an English translation for that.
No,
that's
it's
all.
probably just like the. Well, see, we're already this far. We're this far. No, well, we're not that far in. We're 7 minutes in, and I don't know if
I've
it's
stumped you?
You've stumped me. I don't know if that's just the Latin name of the grape, like
Okay.
you would, a Latin name of anything.
I thought it was a French words. No?
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, you know what? We're going to do a two-parter, so
Yeah,
I'll look that
we'll
up
get
and I'll
back
have
to
the
you.
answer in the two-parter. It's interesting though that you say that. I don't think I think I was into my 30s, and this is a little embarrassing, but I think I was into my 30s before I realized that the names of wines were many were named after the grapes that they're made from. That Merlot was a kind of grape.
I always thought Merlot was a place. So there you go. So
I'll get a little bit more into the naming further on, but
Yeah.
and I'll have a lot of it. I'll admit many of my much of my ignorance around wines, but that's
Yeah.
why this is fun, right? It's all about learning. So the difference between two very popular drinks, wine and beer, is that beer involves fermented grains, whereas
Okay.
wine is from fruit.
right, yeah.
So that's the main difference between
Hops
the
and
two.
barley and
Now there's
or not barley, but
there's a bit of, they do mention there's some exceptions that are pushing the boundaries of beer, with looking at different, aside from just grains. I know beer is going all over the place now with what they're
Absolutely.
doing. So, but we're focusing on wine. So a single varietal wine is one that's made with primarily one type of grape. So it's common to see those wines are what are named by the grape variety. So like the Merlots or the Riesling. So a Riesling is made with Riesling grapes.
okay.
And each country actually has different rules about how much of the variety has to be included in order for it to be labeled as a varietal wine.
Oh,
So there's a certain percentage so for instance, if you're going to call it a Riesling, you have to have a certain percentage of the grapes in the wine have to be Riesling. And that's actually regulated, and it varies by country on what
how is that
percentage.
regulated? Like
Well, I think-
how can they prove what grapes are in which?
Well, they
wine?
do random inspections.
Oh, well, that's
I don't know. I'm sure they
Show
do,
up with
though. I mean,
firearms and make sure. you know?
wine is it's a very prestigious, regulated industry.
Same
so,
with maple syrup industry in Canada. It's very regulated.
Yeah, they don't want you to, like, you're not having poplar syrup
No, absolutely not.
or pine syrup.
No.
Maybe there is such things. I don't know.
Only certain trees produce sap, I do believe.
You're just throwing out things. Do you even know that to be true?
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Jeff's he just volunteered himself for an episode on
people are
maple
probably
syrup
just
in
listening
the future.
Yeah. People are just listening, shaking their heads, going, "What are these fools talking about?" But that's okay.
So you have the
okay.
single varietal wines that are named after the grape, but then you have a wine blend. And so a wine blend is one that's obviously blended with several grape varieties. And most wine blends are mixed after the fermentation is complete. So the grapes are fermented separately and then they're blended. But when they're blended and fermented together, it's called a field blend. And a famous example of that would be a port wine. So a port wine is a field blend where they're blended and fermented together.
Are they usually higher in alcohol content as well, a port wine?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that later on.
Okay.
So there are 9 styles of wine. And so when I think of wine, I kind of have in my head comes to mind red and white, obviously.
Yeah.
Rosé.
There's rosé.
Which in my mind I pictured red and white mixed together. But that's not the case, as we'll learn.
Okay.
And then, of course, sparkling wine.
Sparkling.
But there's actually 9 styles. So I'm just going to go through those. The first one I'll talk about is sparkling wine.
Yeah.
And it's considered the most technically challenged and time-intensive of the wines in the world. So it first came about in France, and it's synonymous with the region Champagne. So oftentimes when we say Champagne, we think...
Okay, so that is why I thought wines were named after the places where they were originated or whatever.
And so that is true of sparkling wines. They are often...
Is there a place called Sparkling?
No.
No, I know, Champagne. Okay, so
And
most sparkling wines are named after
from
the
where they
place.
come
Okay,
from.
Gotcha.
So the EU countries, the countries of the European Union, legally reserve the term champagne for products that are exclusively produced in that region. So you can't make a wine in Canada and make it sparkling and then call it champagne.
Add the word champagne.
They've legally reserved it. So I found that fascinating.
That is pretty neat, yeah.
And a sparkling wine is usually either white or rosé, but there are some red sparkling wines, and they're a little bit more rare. Mm-hmm. And I've had one before in a restaurant. It was nice. The sweetness of a sparkling wine can range from very dry brut styles to sweeter doux varieties. So this is something I didn't realize, and I often, when I'm buying sparkling wine, I'll see brut, B-R-U-T, brut.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was French for hard, and that it actually, and I knew a brut was drier, but, and then the doux is D-O-U-X, and that is French for soft, and it's a sweeter sparkling wine. So if you like a dry sparkling, you should be looking for the brut.
I prefer that over sweeten it myself.
Me too. And the sparkling quality of the wines comes from the carbon dioxide content. So it can be the result of natural fermentation. So either in a bottle, which is the traditional method, and it's in a large tank,
okay, like
or in a large tank designed to withstand the pressures involved. Mm-hmm. Or it can be the result of carbon dioxide injection, which is they consider
they
that
just do
cheaper.
it per bottle?
Yeah, I don't know if it's done per bottle, but it's
Okay.
not done as part of the fermentation process, I guess. And so those types of wine are usually considered the cheaper.
Yeah.
Like they found a little
loophole.
little hack around. We're just going to inject that
Yeah.
carbon dioxide in afterward. It's like making pop, right?
Yeah,
Soda
it
pop.
is.
Sparkling wines are produced around the world, and they're often referred to by the local name or the region. So Cava is from Catalonia,
Which is,
and Prosecco is from Italy. So just a couple of examples.
Okay, wow.
And-
We've had
and-
both of those.
And if you've ever had, I remember drinking Spumante in my younger years, probably
Spumante.
younger than legal years.
Yes.
And we used to call it Spumante because
Spumante,
we drank
'cause you
cheap
drank too
varieties
much.
of it. And Spumante is actually the generic Italian term for sparkling wine.
Okay.
Spumante.
Interesting.
All right, so that's the first style of wine. So for sparkling.
Sparkling.
There's just kind of sparkling. That's what you got.
You got.
And you get the Brut or the Doux, depending whether you want. Brut is for the the drier version, and the Doux for the sweet.
Right.
Pour the sweet.
For the sweet.
For the sweet. Sweet. All right. That's time for
Time
a drink
for a
of
little,
my mystery red.
A little swash of wine.
The second style of wine is we get into the whites. So we actually have 3 different styles of whites. So of the 9 styles, 3 of them fall under the white category.
Okay.
The first is a light-bodied white wine. So I found this fascinating because both you and I said that we prefer red because we think of it as being full body.
Yeah.
But there's actually the range within the white wines as well.
Oh, that makes sense.
So a light body is a light, easy drinking, dry white wine. And they're some of the most sold wines in the world. So they're considered almost like the beer of wine. And they're
Okay.
perfect to drink with most foods. So some of the wines that would fit into that category would be your Pinot Gris or your Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, okay.
And cool climates produce some of the best examples of this light, zesty style of wine. So you had mentioned, talking about the different climates and how that can have an effect.
Yeah.
So now the second type of white wine is a full-bodied white wine. So it's perfect for people who are red wine lovers because they love the rich, smooth taste and the subtle creaminess of this wine. And what makes them different than the light white wines, easy for me to say, usually involves special winemaking techniques that include the use of oak aging. So just like aged whiskeys, wine
like Scotch,
becomes smoother with barrel aging.
Okay.
So a classic choice of this full-bodied wine would be a Chardonnay. And particularly a Chardonnay from a warmer climate, like
Where have
California, Spain, or Italy.
I had Chardonnay before. Have I had that? Do you know?
I definitely have.
Oh, you have?
But
Okay.
now I know if I'm being served white,
Yeah.
I likely will ask for a Chardonnay
Yeah.
because I'll know that that'll be closer to my tastes in red wine.
Excellent. Wow, you really learned a lot.
I know.
About wine.
Go figure.
Yeah.
And then
Now I'm learning it.
The third style of the white is an aromatic white wine, which is very sweet. Mm-hmm. Aromatic grapes are some of the oldest wine varieties in the world. In fact, Cleopatra is noted for her love of rich aromatic white wine. And these wines have explosive, almost perfumed aromas that spring out of the glass into your nose. And they can actually be either dry or sweet, but most will taste a touch sweet due to all those perfumey aromas.
Oh, wow.
So examples of those would be the Moscato d'Asti and the Riesling. Riesling is one
believe
that's
I've had
is
that.
commonly served around here.
Right.
All right. So that covers our whites. Now with rosé, there's just the one. So we're going to find out what rosé really is. It's not just mixing half white and half red into a glass.
No,
Which would be
absolutely not.
What I pictured.
That would be like swamp water.
Do you remember
Bathtub gin.
swamp water? Did you drink that when we used, like as kids, you'd mix a bunch of different pop together?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I didn't do it regularly, but I wasn't a regular customer, but I probably have done that.
Oh, it's great.
Probably with juices, so
I think that's something that's lost on this generation, the joys of swamp water.
swamp water.
Yeah, I don't know why we did it, whether we just had the bottoms of pops and that's what we decided to try, or if I don't know.
Yeah.
We were just clever and looking for an
Curious
experiment.
kids.
Back to the rosé. So it's considered a true winemaker's wine because it's made by dyeing a wine for only a short period of time with the skins of red wine grapes.
Okay, well, whoa. Say that again.
So it's like a white wine,
Yeah.
but they dye it for a short period of time with the skins of red wine grapes. That's what makes it pink, because rosé, of course, is
Okay.
French for pink. So rosé...
So it's colored white wine then, really?
Yes.
Just like tinted?
Yes.
With just like the
skins of red wine grapes.
hues of the... Yeah, interesting.
Rosé wine was first popularized in the late 1700s when French wines were imported in England, and they were called claret, and to describe their pale red color.
Oh.
And today you can find rosé wines of all styles, sweet and dry, made from many different grapes, from Cabernet Sauvignon to Zinfandel, commonly known as white Zinfandel.
Zinfandel. Oh, yeah, I've heard that as well, but I didn't know that was a
grape.
white wine that was a rosé, a type of rosé.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's not really but that they make it with
with the
So
the
rosé is
skins.
its class of is a style of wine all on its own. So.
Okay, yeah.
And,
Interesting.
I mean, there's so much more to each of these, but we're just sort of.
I always thought that Zinfandel was just cheap wine, to be honest. But probably not.
No, I mean it's just a type of grape,
Just
so
a type
it's
of
all
grape.
in how it's made and how how the vineyard.
Interesting.
So yeah, and going through this, there was so much content I could have covered, but I just tried to get a little bit of the, an overview, knowing that like me myself, I can only take in so much information, and there was so much to learn. But this is some stuff that I found fascinating.
This is
So
the
hopefully
Cribs notes.
you, the listener,
or the
will
Cliff's
find
notes.
Cliff's notes, Cribs notes, Cole's notes, all
Yeah,
the notes.
All the notes. Hall of notes.
You making my dreams come true, baby.
Oh, yeah. That's what I do.
So, all right, I mentioned 9 styles of wine. So the first was sparkling. The next 3 were white. Mm-hmm. Then we had rosé, and then the last 3 are all the red. So let's get into the red.
All right. There's
Light-
Malbec,
So there's the light-bodied red wine.
light bodied.
So they're typically pale in color, means you can actually see through them in the glass if you hold them up.
Yeah.
They have very light tannins and are some of the most coveted wines in the world. So a classic red white that most people know is a Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir.
Now it's funny because I didn't realize that a Pinot Noir was a light-bodied.
Wow. Well, now you do.
And I love a Pinot Noir. When it's on the menu at a restaurant,
You
Pinot
really
Noir is
enjoy
where to
that.
go for.
Yeah. But it's not sweet?
Or
then?
Malbec.
Pinot Noir is not sweet? Not sweet wine?
Well, I think there's the ranges within this, but
Okay.
it's a light-bodied
Right.
red wine.
Okay.
So then we get to the medium-bodied red wine. And these are sometimes called food wines. They offer up a lot of flavor with a balance of the zesty acidity, which makes them match with a wide variety of foods, from zesty salads to rich and cheesy lasagna.
Oh, right.
And they're the perfect midweek wine for red wine lovers. I love that. I love that they're like
midweek.
promoting midweek.
Yes, I know. The midweek wine, the anytime wine, the morning wine.
That's good marketing.
You just finished that bottle of wine.
So why not grab this next wine?
Yeah.
So there are many varieties that span the mid-weight red wine category. So some of those include Merlot and Zinfandel. So not the white Zinfandel, but this one's for the red wine. So it's fascinating, as I also thought of Merlot as being a full-bodied red wine. I've
Yeah.
always thought of Merlot as being like
What is it then? If it's not full bodied,
it's medium-bodied.
medium bodied.
Yeah, it falls under the medium-bodied
Meaning
category.
what? Meaning what though? What does a medium bodied wine entail? Like what makes it medium?
Well-
could you tell that by just tasting it? I mean, a wine
I'm sure if you-
aficionado could.
There go the
There goes
motorcycles.
some motorcycles. Anyway,
Yes, sure. Well, that's part of it, right? Like what makes it full-bodied, what makes it not. So it's like the pale-bodied ones are the ones that you can actually see through them in the glass. I guess the medium,
Yeah.
mid-range, and then the full body would
Okay.
be very.
Okay.
I guess they're the deepest. Well, we'll just get into them. Full-bodied are the deepest, darkest, and most tannic of all the red wines. So tannin might sound weird and bitter, but it's the tannin in the wine that actually binds to proteins in our saliva and has a palate cleansing effect. This is why a bold red wine pairs so wonderfully with a juicy steak, such as a
Yeah.
ribeye. And full-bodied red wines are also quite pleasing. They stand on their own as a cocktail wine.
huh?
So some of these would be a Shiraz, a Cabernet Sauvignon, or a Malbec.
A Malbec.
So
has
Malbec is
been-
another one of my favorites.
It's been my favorite as
And
well.
I had no idea that a Malbec was a full-bodied wine and that the Pinot Noir was light-bodied. I would have put them in the same range.
Yeah, no, I
because
wouldn't have
my
either.
palate is that unsophisticated.
Yeah, well, learning all this information about wine that I didn't really know. I knew most of these types of wine existed, but I didn't know that there was so much more to explore within each kind. So I'm going to try to do that. Even with white wine, why not? Why not try some different white wines to see if we like it? I typically don't like white wine, but I bet you there's one out there that I would like.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes like if you're out on a patio and it's a cool summer day or hot summer day and you want a cool drink, a Chardonnay
Yeah.
might be something we want to try.
Well, I like the idea of pairing it with a really nice steak, like the perfect wine with
Yes.
the perfect steak.
Yes,
Because I've recently just learned to cook the perfect steak, so
you have.
I'm ready.
So now we're ready for the wine. Take it to the next level. So we'll round out the 9 styles of wine with dessert wine. So we covered
okay.
sparkling, rosé, red, and those ranges, and then we're finally with dessert wine. So in the mid to late 1800s, sweet wines were more popular than dry. So in fact, several of the most exalted wines in the world were practically as thick as maple syrup.
Okay.
Have you ever had a dessert wine?
I don't think I do.
I had
have.
one from the Yost Vineyard, and the one I had was actually quite thick and sweet. And I can understand why it would be considered dessert wine.
Are you supposed to drink wine with your dessert? Is that what this wine dessert
Well,
is
I guess
all
they
about?
pair well as
Okay.
that, or maybe if you
They
just
pair
want,
well.
or just have it as the dessert
As a
itself.
dessert, that's what I was wondering. Like,
But dessert wines from today now range from dry to sweet and are some of the boldest, most intensely flavored and aromatic wines in the world.
what's the alcohol content like, though? That's my question.
Well, there are different types of dessert wines. One is a port, and I know a port has a
Okay.
higher alcohol content than the usual alcohol content of wine. So let's talk quickly about the word vintage. Do you know what vintage means when it comes to wine?
Does it have to do with the vineyard itself, or?
It actually has to do with the season.
Oh.
So wine grapes take an entire season to ripen. Thus, a wine is produced just once a year.
Okay.
And so that's what the origin of the word vintage stands for. Vin, or the V-I-N-T, stands for winemaking, and the age is for the year it was made. So when we talk about a vintage, we're talking about the year that the wine was made.
Okay.
So when you see a vintage year listed on the label, that's the year the grapes were picked and then made into wine. And just for reference, the harvest season in the northern hemisphere is from August to September, and in the southern hemisphere, it's from February to April. So that would be like Argentina, Australia, those types of wines.
So what is it about wine, though, that makes it more delicious the older it is? It ferments longer?
It's actually not true of all wines.
Okay, there you go.
So occasionally you'll find a wine without a vintage listed on the label. Typically, this is a blend of several vintages together. So wines picked from different years. And in the case of champagne, it will be labeled with NV, which
Right.
stands for non-vintage.
Like swamp water wine.
Non-vintage. Which just means that it's made up of not
Right.
just grapes from all that one particular year.
It's whatever they got.
Let's talk about the taste. So there's a lot of oh my goodness, we're almost near the end of this. This is definitely going to be a 3-parter.
Okay,
Because there's so
well.
much to talk about with wine. But we'll get into the
I
taste
imagine.
here. I think I can cover, taste of wine covers a lot of facets. So there's acidity, sweetness, alcohol, tannin, and then the aroma compounds that are produced in fermentation. So acidity, it has a pH scale that ranges as low as 2.5, which is like a lemon, up to as high as 4.5, which would be like Greek yogurt. It makes wine taste tart.
Wow.
The sweetness is dependent on what style of the wine you drink. So sweetness in wines ranges from having no sugar to sweet like maple syrup. A term dry refers to a bottle of wine without sweetness. Alcohol. The taste of the alcohol in wine is spicy, palate coating. It warms the back of your throat. And the average range is between 10 to 15%, but there's some exceptions. So for instance, port is often fortified with a neutral brandy, upping it to 20%.
Oh.
And then we talk about tannin, which is found in red wines, and it contributes to the astringent quality of red wine. It's like putting a wet black tea bag on your tongue, for a great example. That's how tannin actually tastes like in its purest form.
Wow.
And then finally,
I'm
the
learning
aroma
a lot.
compounds. So within the minutiae of wine, you'll find complexities of the wine's flavors and aroma, and each grape variety exhibits aroma compounds at different levels. This is why some wines smell like berries, others smell like flowers, and other contributing factors include the aging of the wine. Nearly all red wines are aged in oak, which contributes to the oak barrel flavor compounds like
Right.
vanillin, and acts as a conduit to expose the wine to oxygen. Oxidation and aging produce a wide range of unique flavors to wine, including nuttiness and dried fruit and flower flavors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thus ends part 1 of our wine discussion on InfoQuench.
I know,
If you
and
have a
there's so
favorite
much
wine, or
more
if you
to
have any
go.
questions about wine, or if you have any comments on wine, get a hold of us anywhere.
Yeah.
Really, anywhere. Facebook.
Yeah,
Instagram.
Instagram is where we're the most active, but definitely Twitter, Facebook. Check
Local
us out in all those
107.3
places.
FM as well. If
Right.
you're listening to us on the radio, check us out.
Every Wednesday, 1 to 1:30, and you can listen online as well if you're not in St. John.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
And remember, you can catch up on past episodes at infoquench.com.
Or just about anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And help spread the word about InfoQuench.
Till next time.